All right, good afternoon. Earlier today, we issued a statement on Hurricane Irma, which the Secretary General said he was saddened by the reports of immense destruction and loss of life in the Caribbean region since Hurricane Irma made landfall on Antigua and Barbuda on Wednesday. He extends his condolences to the government and people of all the island countries and territories in the region impacted by the hurricane. The Secretary General expresses the UN's solidarity and commends the leadership of the respective governments for their preparedness and response to the needs of the affected communities. The United Nations system is already working to support national relief efforts. And in a statement also issued today by the new Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, in which he also expressed his sadness to the situation. The Emergency Relief Coordinator stressed that in the days preceding the storm's landfall, humanitarian agencies began to pre-position supplies and technical experts to support national and regional relief efforts. These proactive measures have included the deployment of disaster assessment and coordination teams of first responders to augment the capacity in the region where required, and the surge of OCHA staff to Haiti. And our colleagues at the UN Development Program are also sending experts on crisis recovery to support the people of the Caribbean. UNDP has activated its crisis preparedness plan in several countries in the region and will support them both during the immediate response to the disaster and in crucial early recovery activities like debris and waste management, emergency deployment, and supporting core government functions, if so requested. Turning to Syria, the UN was informed today by the government of Syria that road access to some of the besieged areas of Deir ez-Zor city have now reopened. The 93,500 people besieged by Daesh for 3 years had previously only been reached by airdrops run by the World Food Program. Since April of 2016, 300 such airdrops have been conducted. We have received reports that commercial trucks and some assistance have begun to arrive in the newly cleared areas. The UN is currently working with the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and humanitarian partners to respond to those in need of assistance in Deir ez-Zor as soon as security conditions allow. We continue to be deeply concerned for the safety and protection of civilians across the Deir ez-Zor governorate, as military operations are reportedly putting civilians in the line of fire and have resulted in civilian casualties. With continued fighting and military operations, hundreds of families have been displaced in the governorate in the past weeks. The UN reminds all parties of their obligations to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, including facilitating access to those in need of a regular, sustained, and impartial manner in line with international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The head of the UN peacekeeping mission in South Sudan, David Shearer, met with the president of South Sudan, Salva Kiir, yesterday. During their meeting, Mr. Shearer emphasized the need for the UN mission with the government to work together in the best interest of the people of South Sudan. Mr. Shearer reiterated that with the arrival of up to 4,000 new troops as part of the Regional Protection Force mandated by the Security Council, the mission will be able to deploy more peacekeepers outside the capital, Juba. He also reiterated the need for clear lines of communications with the government so that the UN mission could support what Mr. Shearer called, quote, a prosperous future for the country. And from Kenya, our humanitarian partners today appealed for $106 million to scale up their response to the most urgent needs resulting from the effects of the ongoing drought in the northern part of the country. The previous flash appeal for Kenya was launched in March of 2017 and was only 43% funded, while the food insecurity and malnutrition crisis has escalated due to recurrent drought. An estimated 5.6 million people are now impacted as a result of the drought, including 3.4 million people who are food insecure. More than 360,000 children in the arid and semi-arid counties of Kenya require urgent treatment for acute malnutrition. And our colleagues today at the UN Development Program released a report which pinpoints key factors that have drawn young Africans into violent extremism. Among these are deprivation and marginalization, weak governance, and a perception of abuse of power from governments. The report is based on hundreds of interviews with voluntary recruits to extremist organizations such as Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram. The majority of these recruits said it was from it was some form of government action that was the tipping point which led them to join these groups. UNDP warned that Africa's vulnerability to violent extremism is deepening as more young men in remote areas become frustrated with the lack of economic prospects and without outlets for meaningful civic participation. It added that there was an urgent need to bring a stronger development focus to security challenges. The report is available on UNDP's website. And quick note from Guinea-Bissau. The government of Guinea-Bissau, supported by the World Food Programme, is today launching a comprehensive study into the impact of child malnutrition on Guinea-Bissau's social and economic performance. The latest of WFP's Cost of Hunger in Africa series aims to quantify and hopefully then help reduce the devastating effects of hunger on the youngest and most vulnerable. More information online. And I wanted to flag that the Director General of UNESCO, Irena Bokova, condemned the killing of an Indian journalist, Gauri Lankesh, who was shot on Tuesday. Ms. Lankesh was the editor and publisher of the Kannada Language Weekly and an outspoken critic of right-wing extremism. She was shot outside of her home in South India. And our colleagues at the Food and Agricultural Organization report new global food price declined 1.3% from July, a drop reflecting a sharp fall in the wheat prices as the outlook for production of the Black Sea region has now improved. FAO raised its forecast for global cereal production to 2,611 million tons, an all-time high. Worldwide stocks of cereal also expected to reach an all-time high by the end of 2018. And back here, Ana Maria Menendez, the Secretary General's Senior Advisor on Policy, today addressed the high-level forum on a culture of peace on the Secretary General's behalf. She told them that conflicts have become more complex and interlinked than ever before. They produce horrific violations of international humanitarian and human rights law. Against this bleak backdrop, she said the Secretary General continues to urge all citizens, governments, and leaders to overcome differences, prioritize dialogue, and resolve to put peace first. He also calls for a new approach for the UN to ensure that together we uphold the UN Charter, prioritize prevention, and address the root causes of harm in all its forms. She highlighted 4 areas where action is especially urgent in combating today's turbulence and intolerance: investing in children, investing in youth, and recognizing that women's contribution and participation are essential, as well as investing in inclusion and cohesion so that diversity is seen as a benefit and not a threat. Her remarks are online. And our colleagues at ECOSOC wanted us to flag that the 2017 high-level symposium of ECOSOC Development Cooperation on South-South and Triangular Cooperation for Achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was officially opened in Buenos Aires. The main objective of the symposium are exploring the challenges and opportunities created by South-South cooperation and identifying elements that may contribute to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And tomorrow in this very room at 1 p.m., Peter Thompson, the president of the 71st session of the General Assembly, will hold his last press conference as president of the General Assembly. That's at 1 p.m. And the incoming president of the General Assembly, Miroslav Lajčák, his colleagues tell us that the PGA 72 website is currently being worked on in all languages and is expected to be launched on Tuesday, the 12th of September. The English and French press kits are already available online, and other language will follow suit today. And today we have some money that was received, and we're thankful for it. Botswana has paid its in full its regular budget dues, making it the 125th member to do so. So we say thank you, and we now take your questions, and we're thankful for that as well.
Thank you, Stéphane. Today, of course, there were reports about an Israeli attack against the Syrian army, which in Hama, in a position which they are fighting ISIS in particular. The attack was carried out over the Lebanese airspace. Did the UNIFIL report anything about it, and what does the Secretary General think about this attack?
We have not received any reports from our peacekeeping mission related to this attack, which we've seen the press reports from the UN standpoint, we have no knowledge or information as to any more details into the attack and who may have committed it.
Another report a couple of days ago was that many of the senior leaders of ISIS were uplifted from Deir ez-Zor, including Omar Shishani, one of the most atrocious leaders who was responsible for many of the killings and kidnappings and rape in Iraq and Syria. Have you received anything about that? And if he was arrested by any party, what does the Secretary General believe that he should be subjected to?
I had not seen those particular reports. Obviously, anyone who was involved in any of the horrendous crimes that Daesh has committed needs to be held accountable for those crimes. Mr. Lee.
To ask you about on Myanmar. I know that the Secretary General made the statement that he made, but since then there are reports of villages that people have been chased out of being burned to the ground, and there are also some reports of landmines placed by the Myanmar military on the border with Bangladesh. So I wanted to know if the UN is aware of these reports, and also, and I honestly might have missed it, but has the Secretary General actually placed any phone call to Aung San Suu Kyi, and if he has,
as I said yesterday, he has been over the last few months in touch with Aung San Suu Kyi, both by phone and through correspondence. We've seen the reports. We're obviously extremely concerned about the reports of continued violence, especially violence that targets civilians. The reports of landmines is not one we can confirm, but obviously if they were to be true, those would be extremely troubling if they were to be confirmed.
If you don't, I mean, when's the last time, since this is a kind of it's a fast deteriorating situation, when's the last time you spoke to her?
At this point, I have no further details to share with you. Monsieur.
Yeah, thank you. On Togo, you told us last time that Ibn Shaba is supposed to be in a country where it's ready to travel to the country. Is there any update? Because the situation
Yes, Mr. Chambas is currently in Togo, where he is continuing to call for calm and encourage dialogue to resolve all outstanding issues. He's holding consultations with the president, and he's also meeting as well with representatives of political opposition, the diplomatic corps, and civil society. He's also reiterating the UN's commitment to continue to provide support as required ahead of the legislative and local elections in 2018, and to ensure those elections are conducted in a peaceful, open, and credible way.
Yep.
No, let's share the wealth a little bit before you get to eat again.
Thank you, Stéphane. About Myanmar, the UN Secretary General's advisor for prevention of genocide basically said that the country is on the brink of a genocide. It's not there yet, but it's on the brink of a genocide. And most of the credible reports or reports out of Myanmar indicate that it's just like the days and months before the genocides like Anfal in Iraq or Rwanda. In the letter of Secretary General to Security Council, there was no indication about this. The Secretary General hoped to make steps, like Security Council makes steps to prevention of genocide, possibly, because they hold only one meeting.
What's clear,
and they discuss it as a humanitarian crisis.
What is clear is that the international, the responsibility to prevent any further violence against civilians in Myanmar is the responsibility of the authorities in Myanmar. I would refer you back to what the Secretary General said 2 days ago now. I think he was very clear in his language and his concern at the ongoing violence. He answered a question, I think, from one of your colleagues about ethnic cleansing. His position is unchanged. As a matter of principle, the labeling of an event as a genocide needs to be taken by a competent judicial body. Madame.
Thank you, Stéphane. Do you have any scheduled press conference by the Secretary General?
Yes, September 13th in this very room.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
I just want to know that in Tanzania, the major opposition leader has been shot. And I'd ask you, well, during the time that there were no briefings, I'd asked you in writing about the burning down the opposition headquarters. And I'm just wondering, seems I'm not necessarily saying the two are connected, but is the UN aware that a major opposition leader in Tanzania was subject to a gun attack, and what?
The UN may very well be aware. I'm sure the UN country team is aware. I personally had not seen those reports this morning, but we'll look into it.
Okay. And I wanted to thank. I mean, you gave this on Kenya, obviously the drought readout, but as I'm sure you know. Beyond what you emailed after the Secretary General's stakeout, the election results were thrown out, and now there's an enormous fight around the Electoral Commission. And given that there's one on hiatus UNDPA staffer on the commission, and given that a person being now ousted from the commission who was a former UNDP staffer, there are many people in Kenya wondering if the UN is in fact impartial in this case. What is the UN's view of the Electoral Commission dispute? And is Ms. Rosalind Akambe still on?
She's still on special leave. I think the ruling of the Supreme Court is something we've taken note of. I think the Secretary General, in an interview that he did yesterday, I think said it was a sign of democracy, of the process from the beginning. I think we have been calling on parties who had grievances to follow the legal pathways. That has happened. It is now up to the Kenyans and the established procedures to be followed.
So I mean, just because, as you may have seen, the President Kenyatta of Kenya has called the head of the Supreme Court a crook, and said that if he wins on a second term, he will, quote, take care of the court. So does that, I didn't see this interview, but is that in keeping with the Secretary General's saying that everyone is following the legal procedure?
That would not be. Okay. Yes, sir. And then
in an interview, Robert Ford, the former U.S. ambassador to Damascus, admitted or accused the United States of doing most of the killing of civilians in Raqqa by aerial bombardment, indiscriminate aerial bombardment to Raqqa. What does the Secretary General believe about that? And does he call for a ceasefire in that area since many civilians are being killed?
I think you may have been absent, but we have been calling for all parties involved in the fighting in Raqqa to take the most extreme care in ensuring the protection of civilians as the military operations go on.
About accountability of the killing of these civilians, do you believe that
the killings of all civilians needs to be held to account? Linda, and then we'll go.
Thank you, Steph. Turning to Yemen, I was wondering if there's an update in terms of the situation there, humanitarian conditions, financial contributions, or even the status of fighting.
I don't have an update today. I think we had a briefing yesterday from the UNHCR regional rep who provided quite a bit of an update on the humanitarian situation in Yemen. We'll see what we can get you for tomorrow. Right, yes.
Thanks, Stéphane. Mr. Stéphane de Mistura called the Syrian opposition to be realistic and realized that they did not won the war. So this brought a lot of criticism from the Syrian opposition as well as Mr. Riyad Hijab, the head of HNC. Do you think that the special envoy has the right to make such an assessment or such a statement?
Look, I think first of all, I think the statement was misinterpreted if you look at what he said. I would, second of all, underscore the fact that the Secretary General has the full and the utmost confidence in Mr. de Mistura and the way he's handling this very, very delicate and complicated process. I think what's important is that both the government and the opposition heed the calls of many in the international community, and that the government show real readiness to negotiate, and the opposition strengthens its unity in common positions, seeking to move forward on a political process in following Security Council Resolution 2254. I think what is clear, what Mr. de Mistura said, is that there can be no one can claim to win this war. I think we've seen the suffering of the people of Syria, and the only way to bring peace and the only way to bring a victory for the people of Syria is through a sustainable political process. And that's the message from Mr. de Mistura, and that's the message from the UN. The people of Syria want peace and they want stability. That will be achieved through a sustainable political process. And we have the roadmap for that process, and that process is being, for the UN, that process is being managed by Mr. de Mistura. Oleg.
Thank you, Stéphane. Is the Secretary General concerned about possible humanitarian consequences of the new round of sanctions, which is discussed by the Security Council right now? Well, on DPRK.
On DPRK, yeah. No, we'll have to wait and see what the outcome of the new round of discussions are, if they are further sanctions. I would refer you back to what the Secretary General has already said on DPRK 2 days ago. It's a complex situation, and I think we do not want to see we do not want to see the people of the DPRK suffer. And I think the best way to solve that situation is through a negotiated and diplomatic discussions to lead to the denuclearization of the peninsula. Go ahead.
Yeah, and on a separate issue, on Ukraine, I'm sure you saw that the Russian ambassador a couple of days ago announced that that Russia sent a draft resolution to the Secretary General concerning the peacekeepers in eastern Ukraine. Did the Secretary General receive this letter, this draft? Did he look at it?
No, the letter was received. I think it was also meant for the Security Council. We understand there are discussions going on in the Security Council as to this idea of having some sort of a peacekeeping operation in the eastern part of the Ukraine. We, as the Secretary, will obviously be guided by the decisions taken by the Security Council.
Does that mean that the UN is prepared to send some sort of
What it means is that is in every case with peacekeeping missions or special political missions or any sort of peace and security mission, we are guided by the decisions of the Security Council. They are our guide, lord, and master. Or at least,
yeah. Okay, kind of all right. More with the Security Council now in Addis Ababa, I wanted to ask you, and maybe you'll have some, or you can get some later. What has been the UN system's involvement in both the Oromo protests and in the dispute, quite deadly dispute, between the Oromia region and the Somali region in the country? There are allegations of human rights violations by something called the Liu police. Recently, the government has banned an album launch or event by an artist, Teddy Afro. There seem to be a number of the type of issues that the UN comments on in other countries. And I wanted to know, beyond a comment, what the UN, with its presence there, actually does about any of these issues.
Well, first of all, the UN's main presence in Ethiopia is as a regional hub. I mean, it's Economic Commission for Africa. It is not meant as a headquarters for Ethiopia. That being said, I will check with our colleagues if we have any guidance on the latest round of events in Ethiopia.
And I wanted to ask you, I've asked you this before, and again, I'm definitely for free speech, but I want to understand what the role of Jeffrey Sachs is with the UN system. Is he still a special advisor?
I think he continues to be a special advisor. I know he continues to be a special advisor, but obviously that is only in specific when he's here, or I mean, he continues to hold that role, which is $1 a year role.
But I've heard that you say that when he speaks within the realm of his or the circle of his.
Well, what's
the issue is he's recently said regarding immigration, quote, Trump is a sociopath, period. And many people believe that, but I guess I just want to know if someone who is a self-described and on his profile links himself so.
I will obviously be happy for you to share where those comments were made, and it goes to. It doesn't need to be said, but it will be said that obviously the Secretary General doesn't share that opinion. Sir.
Yeah, there has been intensifications of violation of Lebanese airspace by Israeli drones and airplanes in recent days. Has the UNIFIL reported anything about that, and what's the position on such violations?
I haven't had reports in the last few days. UNIFIL reports on violations as it sees them and reports them regularly back to the Security Council.
Does the United Nations condemn such violations or see them as a threat?
Well, I think if you look at the reports, it's pretty clear what our position is.
I wanted to ask you on Burundi. There's obviously been this report by the panel of inquiry saying that there may be war crimes and other crimes have been committed. So I was sort of waiting to see either DPA or Michel Kafando. Is there some response to that report? And also, I think I sent you a photograph of what purports to be Burundian soldiers inside their own country in Bujumbura in a pickup truck marked UN. And I wanted to know, I know that they have deployed to CAR, but is the UN somehow endorsing what the soldiers are doing in Bujumbura?
I don't know the origin of the photo or whether it's real or not real. The point is that no country should use UN-marked equipment that they may have used in a deployment peacekeeping mission in their home country. So that's
Were you able to find on the Cameroon UNHCR staffer?
You should ask UNHCR.
I have.